You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for May 20th, 2022. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where the greatest gift any Democratic candidate can receive is Joe Manchin endorsing their primary opponent. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal.
Turns out Connor Lamb got the, as you wrote in our notes, Driftglass, the Joe Manchin five-finger blue dog death punch.
Yes, indeed.
Which is that's a Kill Bill thing, isn't it?
It's kind of a Kill Bill thing. It's quite simply the deadliest blow in all of politics. Joe Manchin hits you with his endorsement, and then you walk away all giddy and stuff. But once you've taken 5 steps, your candidacy implodes, and your campaign falls to the floor dead. And that's the Joe Manchin effect. The Joe Manchin five-finger blue dog death punch. It's legendary.
It happened to a couple people.
It did.
Kurt Schrader lost bigly despite millions of dollars from Big Pharma, and Joe Manchin's arm around his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
As we said, Connor Lamb lost in Pennsylvania despite, he had 100 endorsements.
He did.
And he was the favorite of the Manchin Cinema wing of the party.
Can I just have a brief aside here?
Uh-huh.
And because your dad liked Connor Lamb.
Well, I'm going to talk about my dad as soon as I finish talking about Summer Lee, because Summer Lee is also in Pennsylvania. And she won her Democratic primary despite big money being spent against her by a Republican political action committee affiliated with AIPAC throwing money into the Democratic primary. Now, that's a sign of, a district that is going to go to the Democrat.
Right.
That here's a Republican political action committee that's going to try to weigh in. And I did talk to my dad yesterday, and Dad lives in Pittsburgh. He's 84, and he voted by mail in the Pennsylvania Democratic primary. He told us when we saw him last summer that he was going to vote for Connor Lamb because Connor Lamb is his congressman. So it was a personal connection to knowing this person, trusting him, knowing he was a Democrat. And I said, well, what if Connor Lamb loses the primary? And he said, straight Democratic ticket. Yeah. he had no, question about this. This is a union guy. This is a college professor, art professor. He doesn't vote Republican ever.
No.
So I talked to him yesterday because I knew that Connor Lamb had lost the primary by quite a margin.
Yeah, he did.
And I was concerned because I wondered if Dad had any negative feelings about Fetterman at all. And again, before the primary, I really didn't have a dog in this fight for myself. I want the Democrat to win. I want the Democrat to defang Manchin. And that's what I want. But it turns out that's what Pennsylvania Democratic voters wanted also. They want someone who will defang Manchin. And so that it was clear that that's what the activists in the party. I find it so interesting that all of a sudden, when we have Democratic primaries that are contentious, what liberals want matters in those races by a lot.
Yeah.
And so I asked my dad about Fetterman, and he said, "Oh, Fetterman's a big guy." And I said, "Yeah, he is. He's physically tall."
Yes, he is.
He said, "I think he's going to make some changes in the Senate." Just by his physical presence.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, that's kind of a good thing, isn't it? He said, yes, it is. And he said, he's going to win. And so that's Dad's prediction for the Pennsylvania Senate race. He says, oh, yeah, I think Fetterman's going to win.
So he's not parsing his vote and saying, I don't even know if I'm going to vote if I didn't.
I'm going to write in myself.
I'm going to write in somebody else.
Yeah, no.
Now, just to make clear, was your dad one of those 2 million mules caught on film by Dinesh D'Souza, delivering his vote by mail and then flipping off the camera?
Thing that just gets me. I looked yesterday because one of the things that was really funny about the Pennsylvania race is, as of this recording, they are still recounting. They're going to recount for Mehmet Oz versus trust fund or whatever, hedge fund guy. They're going to recount that Republican race, which is hysterical because, Trump has already said you should just declare victory and say it was rigged and giving him all kinds of really public advice about how to cheat.
Well, and this you should take
against another Republican.
Yeah,
right?
in a Republican primary.
Breaking Ronald Reagan's rule, right? 11th Commandment.
This is breaking Donald Trump's rule.
Yeah.
You're declaring a Republican primary of a Trump asshole versus a Trump asshole as rigged. By who?
Yeah.
For what?
The Republican Party of Pennsylvania?
Yeah. They. And it's always, and in that his little tweet from his Truth Social, it's they. They did it. And I just, wow. So that's how we're going to roll from now on.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime anyone not a Republican, anytime anyone I didn't personally endorse loses, it must be cheating, even if it's my own party. And that's the rule now because the dear leader has said so.
And so the other thing that's really funny is the extent to which McCormick is the other one, the other Senate candidate. It's Oz versus McCormick. Two things that are really funny about this is McCormick comes out and says, don't worry, the mail-in ballots are coming through. And it's like, oh, all of a sudden mail-in ballots are just fine.
They're great.
If they're your votes.
They're great. They're just great.
And so I looked up mail-in ballots and so forth, and I'm looking particularly for middle child because she's in Wisconsin right now going to school and summer school and doing all kinds of stuff. And I want her to be able to vote in the primary, which our Illinois primary is at the end of June when she will be in classes and doing all kinds of stuff. And so I want to make sure she gets a mail-in ballot. Well, Illinois has recently solidified the vote by mail and made it permanent. All of the stuff that they did during COVID is now permanent, and you have no excuse, mail-in ballots. And you can go online. It's wonderful. You can go online. I did it yesterday. Put in your name, birth date, and zip code, and it tells you whether you're registered to vote or not. And if your voter registration is current and what district you're in, what congressional district, what county, all your city council seat, everything. It's all there. Like here is where you live, and here are the districts where you will be voting, what you will be voting for. So, marvelous. You can just go online and check your voter registration. Why is it complicated anywhere else, right?
Well, you know why.
We know why. So, and then you can go, if you want to register for vote by mail online, you can do it. You have to have a driver's license. Now that's just security. Like, I understand voter ID is a contentious issue and is designed in a lot of states to prevent you from voting, particularly senior African-American people from voting.
Right.
But in this case, it's a security measure to make sure that you're an actual person who has an address and is registered with the Secretary of State in some way. If you don't have ID, you can still go and register for vote by mail in person. You can go, they just want to know you're a real person so that somebody doesn't go online and register 1,500 people for like they would in the Gable or in the
villages.
Villages in Florida, right? They'll have their wives' ballot coming to their home and everything. So
their murdered wives' ballot.
Their murdered wives' ballots, yeah. So, but you can, if you have a driver's license, you can do all of this online, which is just logical. And then they mail you. Actually, today's the 19th. Ballots for the primary are going out today. They told me online. Don't worry that you haven't gotten your ballot yet. It's going to be mailed on May 19th. So watch for it for the primary. And we've got such terrible, it's going to take me days and days to think about how many check marks I need to put next to Tammy Duckworth's name. Right. I had to explain. Middle child was asking, like, okay, so it's a primary. So, like, do I have to, I have to vote. I'll be a Democrat, of course, she says, of course. What are the candidates? I said, well, I'm sorry, middle child, but you really don't have a lot of choices. You've got Tammy Duckworth. Oh, I like her. No, I know, but she's running unopposed in the Democratic primary.
Yes.
J.B. Pritzker, governor, running unopposed in the Democratic primary, And there is a choice. There are choices for the House race, but, the one who's been endorsed by both senators, and she's not a Connor Lamb person. She's a pro-choice woman running, is probably going to be the nominee. So we'll see what happens there. But in any event, I had to explain to middle child that voting in the Democratic primary in Illinois isn't as exciting
No.
as Republicans in Pennsylvania.
No, it's not lit. It is whatever
It is
the opposite
not
of lit,
lit.
unlit.
It is not lit.
No.
And then the other thing that was hysterical about the Pennsylvania race was Sean Hannity's active involvement in this race.
Yes.
And how election night, Mehmet Oz goes in front of his supporters saying we're still going to contest this and we're waiting for the recount and so forth, and wants to thank everybody. And it turns out Barnett went on Twitter to say, I blame Sean Hannity for making me lose. And she's that African-American woman who was too crazy for the Aussies,
If my former aunt would say, crazy as a Betsy bug.
Yeah.
And let's be clear.
In a race of three, right?
Right.
Where you've got the hedge fund McCormick guy, you've got Dr. Oz.
Right.
Quack TV Dr. Oz, and you've got Nut Job, who is too crazy for Hannity.
Right. That's how crazy
she goes on Twitter and just starts, I blame Hannity for this. Yeah. Hysterical.
Well, she got like 20% of the vote, though, right?
She got 24% of the vote.
I mean, the crazies are the majority in the Republican Party.
A huge influx of money from Club for Growth.
Yeah, of course she did.
For some reason.
Well, now I bet you it was Club for Growth Action Committee.
Yeah.
Because Club for Growth Action Committee are the people who are funding Mary Miller in our state.
Oh, Nazis. They like Nazis.
They do. And she's the one with the radio ads that you can't escape from here.
I know.
That begin with, this is not an ad for Democrats because Democrats suck ass. But if you want to listen and be humiliated, it starts off with liberals are assholes because that's the baseline. And then it gets into Mary Miller believes in the Constitution and election integrity and Jesus and life. And, if you liberals are still listening, and it really is just like, it's nothing but a bunch of fucking knuckle-dragging trolls. That's it. And then they go, and let me repeat that for Joe Biden if he's listening. And it's this slow, Mary, Trump, endorse, Mary, Miller. Because, Joe Biden's in a coma. He's brain dead. But that's the baseline now. That is, and this is the Club for Growth Action Committee. And you look at all of our candidates here, all of the Darren Baileys and Sam, what's his name? They're all very much in favor of election integrity and fighting the liberals and the AOC socialists whose green energy programs are driving up gas prices. And you just see how the levers are being pulled. And you look around you in your community, go, oh, that idiot's going to vote for them, and that idiot's going to vote for them, and that asshole who's on the city council is going to vote for them, and that asshole who ran for mayor is going to vote for him, and that prominent citizen who owns 3 businesses is definitely giving these people money. And you realize, oh, God, it really is assholes all the way down, which is why this shit works. And that's what's, kind of disturbing, is that there is no bottom anymore. Yeah. And you can see what's happening right in front of you. What they're running on is liberals are communists and traitors. Yep. And every focus group they talk to, these brainwashed white morons, they'll repeat the same talking points. Now, if I remember correctly, Keith Olbermann and Andrew Cuomo both got in trouble for helping out a candidate.
Big time.
Keith Olbermann gave someone a $3,000 contribution and was suspended, I think, for like a month back in the olden times. But Sean Hannity, I mean, this goes back to the Tea Party, where they just send Fox News drones out to protests that they ginned up and call it news. Right. And then when their candidates get in the race, when it's Donald Trump or whoever, they're just on the same stage with them with a microphone, acting as an agent of Fox News because Fox News, I'm sorry, Charlie Sykes, is not the entertainment wing of the GOP. It is the GOP.
It is the campaign wing of the GOP. Well, absolutely. Offering advice and free advertising, free airtime, etc.
Let me put it this way. Since the Republican Party is nothing but propaganda, they have no policies at all. then
Right.
the propaganda arm of the party is the party.
Right.
So Tucker Carlson is the Republican Party. Rupert Murdoch is the Republican Party. And everyone else dances to their tune. And that's what we're up against.
That because ambitious Republicans, their number one goal is to get on Fox.
Right. That's it.
That's how Ron DeSantis built his entire career, was being on Fox all the time.
And liberals are just as bad because you can see liberals just fighting, climbing over each other to get 2 minutes on MSNBC. Oh, for God's sakes, please put me on. Oh, you mean anybody can go on? Basically, you can wander into the studio. They'll give you a microphone. Yeah, because MSNBC reaches a narrow sliver of otherwise of liberal voters, of progressive voters. Mm-hmm. Fox News reaches way more people. And the knock-on effect of Fox News is orders of magnitude reach. So of course it is. There's no other party mechanism other than the Fox News network.
Right. And you can then clip your appearance on Fox with Steve Doocy or whoever. Sure. Look, I talked to Sean, and you put that on Facebook, and you've reached another 100,000 of your voters.
Yeah. Well, that's why these gibbering half-wits, in the hearings in Congress are barking about, where does life begin? You got baby parts in a refrigerator? Right. It has nothing to do with the person they're talking to. It has everything to do with the camera behind them.
All the time.
And the 30-second clip they're going to put to raise $2 million to go back.
And the extent to which their text messages are filled with messages from Fox bookers and producers.
Yeah.
I've got a clip for you. I've got telling you what to say. I mean, we know that from Devin Nunes.
Yeah.
Repeating Hannity points, bullet points from Hannity in a hearing, because that's what's going to get him on TV.
Now, there is one small group of hardworking congresspeople working in one corner of Washington, trying to shed a little bit of light on one part of this vast, racist, criminal, seditionist monster party. And that's the January 6th committee, who you might remember, Kevin McCarthy was offered the opportunity to vote on a bipartisan committee and told them to fuck off. Mm-hmm. So a bipartisan committee was offered 50-50, this, that. And Kevin McCarthy told him to go shove it. And wanted to put his saboteurs on the committee to make sure the committee didn't get anything done. So since the Republican Party refused to cooperate with a bipartisan committee that would have had Rodney Davis on it, which would have been hilarious, they have a largely Democratic committee with 2 Republicans on it. And this is the only group of people currently in Congress that I know of who are working hard to point out the fact that one party is a hardworking, normal political party with all the faults, and one party is an insane, criminal, racist, secessionist conspiracy.
Violent party.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, as you know, one of my favorite groups of people in this whole wide world are the no labels people.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But they have turned a corner. I mean, they've washed off their clown makeup, I think is what they've done, right?
Well, here's the thing. No labels never turned a corner. It's just one long curve.
Yeah.
And they've been going around this curve since they were founded. And I'm the guy who 48 hours after they announced wrote a long thing about these fuckers are not in no labels. This is both sides do it. Big beltway, both siderist money.
Rebranding. Yeah.
Got to rebrand the Republicans. And the way we rebrand Republicans as the not crazy, not seditionist, not Tea Party, not nut job party is by pretending that we don't care about labels. And remember, people, every time you hear someone say this is not about Republican or Democrat, it is definitely about Republicans and Democrats.
Totally.
And that was no labels thing. And they were one of the first, but definitely not the last of these, all run by Republicans who hire a bunch of consultants and raise money for their third way, third party, country over party, third way independent, I'm an independent movement, which are all grifts. And this thing had, David Brooks on the board and a bunch of other of those type of the Republican Party is obviously every horrible thing liberals have always said it was. We can't admit that. So we have to invent a rationale for blaming everyone. Oh, no labels. Everyone's to blame. Everyone's to blame all the time. So the no labels people have busted out with this tweet. Despite an early attempt at bipartisanship, the January 6th committee work has become a partisan exercise about which the public is skeptical.
Telling us what the public thinks is another thing that no labels has been doing since the beginning.
Right. Americans,
The
voters.
public wants to move on from the Bush administration.
The public
And
doesn't want to look back.
labels. Yeah. Yeah.
The public is sick and tired of all the partisan bickering. You mean all of the hellfire being launched by the right at the black president? You mean that?
Yeah, that part, no, that's fine.
And you can never nail these scumbags down because their answer is always, "Well, I guess you're part of the problem. I guess you're one of those partisans." And really, it is the problem of Washington, D.C. specifically, and the Beltway media generally, that there's this enormous concentration of consultants and third-way guys and think tank people who are all being paid a lot of money to lie about the state of politics. And because one group is very dedicated to overthrowing the U.S. government, replacing it with a totalitarian white Christian state. Those are the Republicans. And there's another very well-funded group who are dedicated to pretending that isn't happening. And the only way to pretend that isn't happening, because it's punching you in the throat every single goddamn day, is to lie about it always being the problem of both sides. Both sides are always to blame. That's why we can't label anything. We don't want to talk about what anyone's doing or what their intentions are. And now they've found out they can't do that anymore. So now they're just going to attack the one group of people who are trying to address the problem as partisan, because they are finding that the Republican Party is exactly what we said it was. And that is in violation of their charter, which is never blame the fucking Republicans for anything.
But they've been labeling people for the past year and a half.
Sure. Well, as we have said on this podcast many times, the largest and most partisan cult in America are the no labels people. The largest and most partisan, most headstrong, most dug in like ticks group of partisans are the third way, independent, centrist assholes.
Which we all knew from the moment Trump put his hand on the so-called Bible. We're coming to rebrand after this guy shit all over the Constitution. We knew that they would be coming. And now they are attempting to diminish the impact of the hearings. Yep. Very sad weekend for the people of Buffalo and the nation as a whole.
Yep.
As somebody took what Tucker Carlson was saying on television seriously.
Right.
And Elise Stefanik had quite a weekend herself.
If you don't know who Elise Stefanik is, she's third in line in the House.
She's from upstate New York.
And she is the person who Liz Cheney was shoved aside for. Because Liz Cheney was in that position, basically third in line in the GOP, in leadership in the GOP, until she decided Donald Trump should be held accountable.
And they need a woman. They always put a woman in that position.
Right. And Liz
Kathy
Cheney...
McMorris Rogers was in that position before Liz Cheney. Yeah.
And voting record-wise, Liz Cheney's 100% behind Donald Trump. Lined up with him all the way. The one thing that the bone in her throat was, trying to overthrow the government. No, that's too far. And so she was shoved out the door. And Elise Stefanik, who was up until that moment being marketed as a reasonable, thoughtful, centrist, Paul Ryan Republican, suddenly, because this is the party she's joined. She joined the fucking Nazi party. Now she has to put the swastika on and a little mustache and go completely off the rails. And she did this week.
With a pretty face and a set of lip gloss, she went out and did the dirty work for Kevin McCarthy of bowing and kowtowing to white nationalism with tweets that were absolutely calculated to make those who believe in replacement theory, white replacement theory, comfortable.
Yes, that was her job this weekend, to calm the brown shirts that keep the Republican Party in power, and keep them in line, and make sure that they know that their leadership sees them, understands them, and is behind them.
Right. Yep. And this is a woman who has a Harvard degree. This is not, I said on Twitter, we comfort ourselves on the left with believing that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Sarah Palin, are pig people.
Right.
Who are too stupid to know what actual policy is, and are there for the grift and the trolling.
Right.
Everything that Elise Stefanik did on Twitter this past weekend was calculated.
Yes.
And came from a place of knowledge and awareness of who she was talking to and what she was saying.
Yes.
And that's pure evil.
Just like Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is not stupid. Tucker Carlson knows exactly what buttons to push and what words to use to make sure the brown shirts are his audience, his loyal
and the
audience
Proud
forever.
Boys and everyone in that universe knows exactly they're getting their signals right from the top of the Republican Party.
And this is the thing. And again, because this bears repeating. The people who are smart, Mitch McConnell is smart.
Oh, yeah.
Tucker Carlson.
He wouldn't answer that question this week either. Oh, racism is bad. But what about the white nationalist policies that your party is pushing? Racism is bad.
There's a thing happening over. I'm going to circle away.
That disturbed person should be punished and be put in jail. Throw away the key. Yeah.
Well, and take it at face value that these people and many others like them are smart enough to know what they're saying.
Yeah.
That means they understand who they're talking to. The only people who are still lying about the Republican base are centrists and independents and frankly people.
And the Beltway media.
And a lot of never-Trumpers.
To a large extent, yep.
A lot of never-Trumpers are still, they want it both ways. They want to lie about the Republican base prior to 2016. This is a wager I have with myself. And
tell me about this. I saw it in our notes. I didn't know what it meant. The 5 or 6 year wager. What's that mean?
Well, I just tweeted a couple of minutes ago. Elise Jordan just now on MSNBC. Over the past 4 to 6 years, everybody drink. Elise Jordan, Republican analyst, Republican mercenary, formerly Republican. Now she's
and to her credit, never Trumper from day one.
Sure.
I will give her credit for that. Like, she didn't waver and say, "Oh, now we need to work with him." She didn't do that.
No, but she because if you listen to her showing up on podcasts, she reserves most of her venom for the Democrats. Because Democrats should this and Democrats should that. Every fucking never-Trumper thinks they should run the Republican Party. Every fucking never-Trumper, with a couple of exceptions, swears they had no idea what was going on inside their own party for decades. But they know exactly what Democrats should do, and they have a mysterious psychic connection to independents and centrists, and they can tell Democrats exactly how to play to, the suburban mom in Georgia, the white suburban mom in Georgia. Well, wait a minute. You just said you didn't know shit about anything your party was doing for 30 years. When did you fucking become an expert on human motivation if you didn't see what was going on right in front of you to people you were broadcasting to every day? How did you miss that? And that, of course, is the reason why people like me don't get invited onto the Charlie Sykes show. Because we would ask questions like that. But so Charlie Sykes is having a conversation this week with Tim Alberta about the shocking discovery that the Republican Party is full of crazy people. Shocking. It's always very shocking. This time it's specifically about the evangelical church. And Tim Alberta has a long article, I think in The Atlantic, about the poisoning of the evangelical church. And this is just a couple of quotes. Charlie Sykes, this is a tough piece to wrestle with. I'll be honest with you, because, it's one of those things that I'll admit I've had the hardest time understanding over the last, now it's, going on 5 or 6 years. The transformation of the Christian church. And Tim Alberta weighs in with, the disruption volatility of the previous 5 to 6 years, Trump's presidency. Tim Alberta, what I've seen over the past 4 or 5 years is all blah, 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 ugly and intense. Tim Alberta, over the past 5 years, it traces back a bit further, but really intensified over the last 5 years. Charlie Sykes, no, this is the one that I wanted to focus on. I think this is important because there will be people who say, well, there's nothing new. This has always been this way. No, this is in fact new the last 5 years. Let's talk about Donald Trump, because anything prior to the 2016 implicates Charlie Sykes in a way that he cannot stand. And so he's just, and he says a lot of good things. He says a lot of the right things, but he just cannot stop lying about the state of the GOP before 2016. And the post I wrote, I just put up Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson from 2001, blaming the ACLU and lesbians and liberals and witches for 9/11.
Yep.
And I could put up a lot of shit from the Reagan years. I could put up all the stuff that John McCain went through, going from the guy who told the truth at Liberty University and lost, to the guy who went up and kissed Jerry Falwell's ass because he knew what party he was in.
Yep.
And that got him Jerry Falwell's endorsement.
And John Hagee's too, even crazier. Yeah.
And the idea that this all happened, the evangelical church it might have been problematic for a while, but just the last 5 or 6 years, they've gone completely nuts. They've gone completely crazy. Is prima facie a lie. And again, you're stuck with the same two questions. Are you lying because you're too stupid to know what your own party's been doing for 30 years? Mm-hmm. Or are you lying because you were never going to have to confront people who will wave receipts in your face and say, well, what about all this other shit? And that's a question to which they have no self-absolving answer. So that's a question they will never tolerate being asked in their presence. And that's what the 5 or 6 wager is. 5 or 6 year wager means every time I hear these people talk, I wait and listen for it. It's always there. Remember,
Drift Class, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
I was thinking about the word scrim, SCRIM, scrim.
I'm familiar.
And how a scrim is a sheer piece of fabric that actually appears like a wall when it's lit from behind, right?
Like a movie screen, yeah.
Right. And in a theater, you light it from behind and it's sheer. You can see through it. But when you light it from behind, it looks like a wall. It's an easy way and a cheap way for a theater company to put up a wall in a production. And I feel like that's what Donald Trump took down between the crazy evangelicals and the Republican Party was he said, oh, no, come in and lay hands on me. And I'll be glad to tear gas black people and march to a church that I've never entered and hold up a Bible, a random Bible, to send a message to white Christians that I'm their guy.
Right.
That crazy woman who's running in Georgia, she's only polling at 6%, but she's the guns, babies, and Jesus candidate. And she was on Twitter today. People were exposing her exposing, quote unquote, as if, but showing a video of her saying, God let us destroy the Indians so that we could worship Jesus on white land. That is essentially what she said.
Yeah.
And there's no scrim. There's no transparent wall between that comforted people like David Brooks and Charlie Sykes.
Right.
That is the thing that's disappeared in the past 5 or 6 years. That was always a thing where there was total transparency between the two groups. Well, and knew the evangelical right knew they were manipulating the Republican Party and vice versa.
Let me propose an alternate theory. I love your theory. Love your theory. As opposed to scrim, I'm going to say Scrim Shades.
Okay.
Because, I did a post many years ago about trying to understand the Fox News people.
Yeah.
And what drives them. And I said, you have to wear the special glasses.
The special glasses with Fox News and the Confederate flag, right?
And once you peer through these glasses, you understand, oh, this is what they're seeing. This is who they are. This is how they see the world. Now, where your broad theory, I think, breaks down is that if this scrim between the filthy activities of the campaign people to seek out and lure in the crazy evangelicals, the hard right anti-abortionists, the right to life folks, the gun folks, all of the crazies who make up, let's say, 90% of the Republican Party.
And the crazies is the word Karl Rove used for them.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
So the idea that nobody knew what was going on is insane because the entire Republican apparatus, the election apparatus, depends on, I wrote a post in 2005, I think, Little Red State Fundy, where I'm like, these people are very explicit about the end times and the importance of electing, getting Republican, conservative, Christian judges on the courts so they can rule over America because America's God's chosen land. And they didn't get that out of thin air. And remember, there was a documentary called Jesus Camp, I think, where cardboard cutouts of George Bush were being worshipped by the worshipers. Now pray to the president, tell him what you want. And granted, that's one little sliver of a larger picture. But the idea that this scrim held, blinded the Beltway media is simply wrong. I mean, and here's why I know that. They have all the resources of the New York Times at their disposal.
Yeah.
I'm just an asshole blogger in the middle of a cornfield. Most liberal bloggers, as you know, Blue Gal, we're amateurs.
Yeah.
We're complete amateurs. We started blogging because in 2003, 4, 5, etc., nobody was talking about what we could see right in front of our face.
Okay.
And so how we're out here in the real world, living our real lives, talking to real people who are, in some cases, just out of their fucking minds. Asking the question, how is nobody not seeing what's happened to the Republican Party? How is what I see in my real life every day not showing up on the New York Times op-ed page every day? Because it's scaring the shit out of me.
Yep.
So the question is,
if I can interrupt you for a minute, because that dovetails perfectly with something that I want to bring up about Buffalo.
Oh, please. Yeah.
And the massacre of Black people. And the fact that it's not enough to point out the white nationalist, racist, anti-democracy. Because there's the thing about the anti-democracy movement is that at its core, it is there to erase Black people as citizens of this country. That's what it's about. It's about making sure that white people are in charge. That's what Tucker Carlson is about. The Great Replacement Theory is about making sure white people are in charge. Everything Laura Ingraham does is about making sure white people remain in charge of this country. And I just sense that behind all of the both-siderism, behind all of the let's work on some bipartisan things, let's make peace, etc., and the overall just tone of the Beltway media is we're gonna move on from this story. We're not going to talk about the Republican Party destroying democracy. We're not going to talk about the racial element of this mass murder. And we're not going to talk about the regular threats that Black people have to their voice, their daily lives, their economies. I mean, that's what the abortion debate is about. Not about stopping white women who live in Atlanta from having it taken care of. There is a constant drumbeat now from Wisconsin of you can go to Illinois and have an abortion.
Right.
All the white men are telling you, don't worry about it. You can just go to Illinois.
Sure.
And I'm sitting there, and Jerry Nadler actually asked at a committee hearing, wait, this is the United States of America. Why should it matter what state you're in, what rights you have? And his the Republican person on the committee said, well, it's a matter of personal choice of the voters in that community. As if, as long as white people are in charge, we can decide who's a slave state and who isn't. And that's what this is about. And the media, this is why I want to get back to what you were saying about the media not being willing to talk about the war, not being willing to talk. We were lied into war. It was all about ratings. It was all about enabling the Republican Party to rebrand. The whole Tea Party was a whole new movement, blah, blah, blah. What they're doing now is refusing to do the work of anti-racism. And I'm a little white lady in the middle of a cornfield. I know I've got work to do. I'm not claiming to be crowned any hero in this, but I know the work that we have to do going forward is the same work we had to do in 2003 of we're looking at this and we're seeing what's happening, and what is happening is the voices of Black people in this country are being erased in a systematic way by one party. If we don't keep that drumbeat going, I mean, that's our job, the way it was in 2003, to call it out.
Right.
That's all I'm going to say.
And I've got two things to add to that, or to say to that, because I love talking to my wife about this sort of thing. You make a lot of very good observations, none of which I disagree with. I'd like to add to it, however, the idea that this scrim that blocked off the greatest minds, the greatest political analysts in our country, the cream of the crop of our country, couldn't see what was happening right in front of them. But we idiots out here in the cornfield could. Turned out we were right and they were wrong. But they weren't just wrong once. They were wrong over and over and over and over and over again. They're still being wrong. They're professionals at being wrong. And yet there is some force above it all that makes sure that those people are never out of the public spotlight. It doesn't matter how badly they fuck up, how wrong they are. So you can be wrong once or twice in a catastrophic way on some jobs, I suppose. But being this wrong always in the same direction, always in the direction of don't look for racism. It's not racism. It's both sides. It's something else. Just that big scrim there, that's a wall. I have no idea what's going on beyond it. Of course you know what's going on beyond it. Mm-hmm. You, Mr. David Brooks, advertise that you have lunch with 3 politicians a day. You talk to everybody. You're taking friends to sandwich shops. You go to the Aspen Institute. You're traveling this big old country of ours, talking to all kinds of people, and yet you had no fucking idea that your party was a racist shithole all of your life. And once it was proven to you that you had been just goddamn wrong, your reaction was, well, it's both sides. That isn't failing to see beyond the scrim. That is willful blindness. Mm-hmm. That is wearing the scrim as glasses so you refuse to see what's happening in front of you. You do it on purpose because the alternative is facing the truth and facing the fact that you've been wrong your whole life in a really horribly destructive way. And that is something that you and I don't have the luxury of not doing. Right. But there is a protective force acting from above that buffers these people from any sort of market judgment.
It's money about and ratings.
Well, yeah,
it's money.
I understand that, but it is weirdly consistent that the same people who are wrong in the same way every time, and again, reality just punches them in the dick over and over again. They never stop being wrong, and they never lose their job, which is really weird in any other profession. The other side of that is something that we discussed way back in 2009. And I wrote it up in a post I wrote way back in 2009. And it was our friend Katie Abrams. Remember Katie Abrams?
I don't want America to turn into Russia.
Right. I don't want America to. And she's pretty interested. She's never been interested in politics and always seemed to have faith in our government. Now,
and we've always been at war. So I don't really, I was never involved in politics when we got into war because we're always at war, right?
Well, and this is what I wrote 13 years ago and see if that applies to today. This is from a long post called Like a Virgin. During the Bush years, people like Ms. Abrams never saw that their love of their dear leader and their fealty to his administration as something political. They saw it as normal, as the universe being in its proper wingnut default setting. White, male, fundamentalist, Christian conservative, flight-clad, and killing scary brown people. As long as that remained true, all was right with the world, and people like Ms. Abrams were absolved from their don't worry, go shopping leaders of any responsibility for paying any attention to anything the government was actually doing. But once the dear leader's reign ended, as far as people like Ms. Abrams were concerned, the natural order of mindless obedience in exchange for a smug and blissful ignorance collapsed. Quote unquote, their country was suddenly broken and fucked up for reasons they dared not think about too much. Their country was suddenly awash in dirty fucking hippies who for some reason were no longer satisfied with being cultural punching bags. Their country suddenly had politicians and activists who said mean things about the dear leader and the Republican Party, and they got away with it. And worst of all, their country suddenly had a scary black man living in the dear leader's pretty white house, probably having dirty Muslim sex on the dear leader's sacred Christian bed and putting his filthy Kenyan hands all over their pure country's white constitution. Those people haven't changed one scintilla.
Nope. They've just changed their God from Bush to Trump.
The thing that drove them insane was losing.
Right.
The thing that drove them absolutely insane was Karl Rove saying, don't worry, it's a slam dunk, and they lost. And then they lost again.
Republican majority. Yep.
And they can't stand it. They can't stand the idea because in their mind, that the country is normal when a white asshole is running it.
And it must be cheating if they lose.
Right.
Every time.
Exactly. There must be something horribly, existentially, conspiratorially wrong with the system if they lose. Therefore, we must root out the people behind the conspiracy. And eventually you get someone like Dinesh D'Souza having his horrific, mockumentary about voter fraud, which is just bullshit from start to finish, having its opening at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
With the entire freak show retinue in attendance.
Unbelievable retinue.
And between the collapse of the Bush administration and the rise of the Obama administration and the Trump administration and the Biden administration, between all of that whiplashing around, these same people haven't changed at all. The punditocracy hasn't changed at all. Fox News has only amped up the amount of pressure to just do away with democracy because it's horribly fussy and requires that you lose sometimes and you try to get along with people, which, as God's chosen people, they shouldn't have to do shit like that.
Right.
And that's where we are today. So it depresses me, but also kind of, I don't know, encourages me a little bit that I can go back 13 years and read something I wrote way back before Donald Trump was a glimmer in anyone's eye and say, yep, those are the same people. I saw those people for who they were back when David Brooks was lying and pretending they didn't exist, back when Charlie Sykes was making money telling those people, you're right, and the liberals are trying to destroy America. And I
went back today for a Crooks and Liars fundraiser post to a video from today, 2009. It's ironic that it's 2009 also, of Keith Olbermann's Worst Person in the World from today in 2009. And the worst people in the world were Sean Hannity saying that George Bush had inherited the burden of 9/11.
Sure.
And, Keith Olbermann said, can somebody get Sean Hannity a calendar? Because it happened during the Bush administration. But it didn't matter. I mean, no one watching Hannity was going to believe that. And then the second person was Tucker Carlson lying about abortion.
Right.
And the third person was a Republican congressman lying about climate change. And same as it ever was. It was really kind of stunning to see how little has changed.
Well, that's not quite true. Now, as you know, Sean Hannity's in trouble. Would you like to take that and run with it, Blue Gal?
Oh, well, yeah, because Diamond and Silk are against Sean Hannity now.
Yeah.
Diamond and Silk no longer work for Fox Nation.
No.
And I think the only income stream they're likely to get is with Lynn Wood's Traveling Circus. I think that's it. Right?
They went out on Twitter and said Sean Hannity is no different than
those left-leaning liberals.
So disappointing. Because
how disappointed are Diamond and Silk and Sean Hannity?
Yeah. And what Sean Hannity, maybe he's figured this out now that he's, nearing retirement. There's always a faster, dumber gunslinger coming along.
Right.
There'll always be somebody more racist, more stupid, more bomb throwing, and more just and the mob will respond and call you the pointy-headed intellectual and toss you out.
All of a sudden, you're a left-leaning liberal, Sean Hannity. Right.
There'll always be another one because once you start this ratchet moving click, click, click to the right, there's no stopping it.
Yeah.
The thing that stopped fascism in a lot of regimes around the world is bombing their cities, destroying their armies, and holding their leaders responsible during war crimes trials.
And shaving the heads of the collaborators and making them march through the street, as Susie Madrak has a post on that today. Yeah.
Once you've won. But that's the point. Fascists don't stop being fascists just because they lose some battles. Yeah, they're in it for the long haul. Republicans have been making war on women since the day Roe was settled.
Yep. Oh, before that, too.
Yeah. And there's always money. There's always a shit ton of money to pay people like that. And this is where the parallels between German industrialists and the fascist party in Germany become startlingly, relevant. You will always have rich assholes who hate democracy and want to get rid of regulation and get rid of brown people and make it easier to bust unions so they can have cheap labor and raid other countries and steal their resources, willing to fund fascists. There's no money in poor people. There's no way to get rich.
Found a way to do it by stacking the courts. I mean, what happened with the Fifth Circuit this week is something that Senator Whitehouse has been warning us about for years.
He has.
And they're basically trying to dismantle the administrative state and say the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, cannot regulate securities. And that will affect the EPA. I mean, it's just, Congress has to do this. Well, we know Congress is completely hogtied by the filibuster.
As long as it has Mitch McConnell's boot on its throat, it will never get anything done. That's just a simple fact. And
so
you can rage all you want.
Unless we get 3 or 4 more senators, and during those first few days, switch over to at the very least a talking filibuster. Yeah. And force 48 Republican senators to sit there for days and listen to Rand Paul.
Right.
in order to stop anything.
It'll break a few of them. It'll break a few of them.
Break a few of them, but you got to have a quorum. If
Right.
you set the rules of, we're not going to get rid of the filibuster, that's too radical, but
Right.
you're going to have to break out the cots, wear diapers,
talk all day and
stay
night,
up all night, take turns so that there's a majority of your caucus sitting there listening to Rand Paul, because he'll be the one who'll be happy to stand up and filibuster everything for you.
Chapter 45 from Atlas Shrugged begins as follows. Yep. Make him do it.
I don't think Mitch McConnell has the stamina.
No.
A lot of his caucus is over 80. They don't have the stamina to do it.
But as long as
and
Mitch
they're
McConnell...
so spoiled, too. I mean, they don't do anything. Half of them, according to Lawrence O'Donnell, half of them are completely staff-driven anyway. So the fact that they physically have to be there, can't go home on the weekend.
No.
Yeah.
Can't poop.
Forget it. Gonna miss a basketball tourney.
Yeah.
On the TV. Yeah. No.
Apparently they don't know that that Murder, She Wrote is on. At 3 o'clock. We got to get the fuck out of here. Who knows what that crazy Jessica's up to today?
Yeah.
I realize that we are coming up on an hour, so I'd like to ask you if you would like to talk about what a terrible fundraiser you are.
I'm a terrible fundraiser, Diff Glass.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I want to thank everybody who's donating to and has donated to my hearing aid fund. We're at 87% of what I need to pay off those hearing aids, and that's amazing, given that I'm a terrible fundraiser. And the reason I say this, I got called out by a person who means very, very well, man who loves the podcast, and wrote me and said, look, you need to be tweeting that fundraiser every half hour.
Round the clock. Yep.
Round the clock. And I'm just like, I don't want my Twitter account to look like that. But, and he meant well. He said, look, you have 4,000 listeners. You should be able to raise $5,000 in a week.
Right.
And I said, I'm sorry, but it's taken 5-6 weeks, and that's okay. I'm not going to become that person. I'm not going to become the person who just, I have other things to do. First of all, I did 40 postcards to voters this week.
Yes, you did. And as soon as this podcast is over, I got to go to the mailbox and drop them off, or I'm in real trouble.
Yeah, that's right. They've got stamps on them, ready to go. So yeah, I think I have other things to do besides hawk my. And I got in trouble anyway with my dad because he was upset that I hadn't come to him first for money, and I said, "You're 84 years old and you're living on fixed income. I'm not coming to you for money for something I can raise online." So.
And by the way, this is how at least a few, we are not a podcast that takes advertising revenue.
Right.
We're not a podcast that we get a trickle, $1 a month from merch. Maybe.
Yeah. Oh no, we don't see
nothing.
Deposits. They wait until we quote unquote make $50 before they'll send us anything. And I think we've gotten 3 times in the history of this podcast.
Right.
Zazzle has sent us $50 in 3 times since 2010. Yeah.
And part of that is that you and I both are guilty of this, although guilt is not the word I would use. Mm-hmm. We entered into this avocation for the cause.
Yeah.
This is going back to, the Bush administration.
Right. When we started in
blogging.
2010. We started during the early Obama administration. Yeah.
We started writing with the Bush administration, and this is an extension of that. Right. And I never held a fundraiser until I had been unemployed for 2 years. Yeah. And said, well, this is kind of what I do now.
Yeah.
So
you kind of realize there's no other job coming.
Right. There's no other job coming. And this occupies the same emotional and time space as a full-time job. So it was moderately successful, and that was fine. It tided me over. I'm very grateful for it. And this is not an extended pitch for money. This is an explanation of sort of how we got to where we are right now. We did not. Let me put it this way. I went to a couple of years ago, all the local small business startup support organizations.
Oh.
The ones that are like run by the Chamber of Commerce and the Small Business Administration. I used to work with them in another life, in another profession. I went to them and said, well, here's my job. My wife and I have this podcast, and it's sort of central, but it also is fed into by what I write during the week and what she writes during the week. And we sort of have this tiny media empire. So, And I said, now, how can I make this a more efficient form of me doing my job and making enough from it to support our family? And they looked at me, everybody looked at me like I was, like I was from Mars. Because they were like, no, like we do brick and mortar business.
Yeah.
What's your business plan?
You sell potpourri? You can do that on Etsy, and we can help you with that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What was your business? We didn't have a business plan. We started this because our country was in trouble, and we were deeply alarmed that the wrong people were in control of the microphone, which they still are.
And we had enough people at our meetups saying, "You too
should do this."
We just would start talking to one another and having conversations, and everyone else would shut up and listen to us.
Yeah.
We weren't trying to monopolize, but we both spoke the same language and had that encyclopedic recall of remember when Bush did this, remember when the blogosphere did that. And we're not the only ones that have that. We're not by a long shot. You and I were talking about Rick Perlstein earlier today. And you should go to his Twitter stream to see, again, encyclopedic mind with recall of all of the things that happened and the media fail that ensued. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not the only ones, but enough people, and I have a rule of 3. If 3 people tell me something over the course of a period of time, I take that as a sign I got to do something, right?
Well, and it was maybe, we're not millionaires. We can't, buy our own. We can't buy our own Congress people. We can't support. I can't support the Illinois Policy Institute, the liberal version of that. But what we can do is maybe give some people who are deeply worried and confused and like at sea about where we are, loan them our vocabulary and our memory. Right. And say, this is where we are, this is why we're here, and these are the words you can use to describe it and take hold of the universe that you live in and make it make sense. It won't make it better. It might be worse. You might oh shit, really? We got here because of this long train of events stretching back to,
and things don't change over 13 years. Things haven't changed that much, really?
Might piss you off, but as a diagnostic tool for understanding the world we live in and how we got to where we are and why getting out of this is a long, slow grind. Yeah. What I tweeted the other day, which is, whatever your political dreams may be, you're going to have to build it with off-the-shelf components.
Right.
There's no new people out there to suddenly pop in and say, hi, we're the socialists you've been waiting for your whole life. There's 40 million of us waiting outside, and we're ready to take over the Democratic Party and make us a 70-vote majority in the Senate. That is not going to happen in your lifetime. We can get there, however, by slowly and agonizingly making progress every single day. And that is not a message that is, I find depressing. I find it realistic. But as long as we're moving in the right direction, I'm not hopeless.
No. And you're hopeless after 8:30 at night.
Yes, I am. After 8:30.
Drift Glass and I learned something about our marriage this week, or at least I did.
We did.
And one of the things is, Drift Glass, another reason we do this is I do love talking to you. Most of the time I love talking to you about these things. But if I try to talk to Drift Glass after 8:30 at night, everything is something that's uninteresting to him, and the universe is doomed. And it's just because he's tired. After a long day, he's tired.
Well, and at the end of a long day, one more conservative asshole whose name I vaguely recognize saying something that sounds exactly like every other conservative asshole I've heard for the last 30 years is like, I don't fucking care. It's just another asshole.
It's another white noise nonsense.
Literally
and then I had the nerve to bring up Chuck Schumer in a bright light.
Oh, God.
You were just like, oh, God, no.
Yeah. Chuck Schumer will save us.
No, he won't.
No, he won't. But this is one thing that, upon mature reflection, I realized I had taken it too far. And had gotten
Thank you, honey.
I had gotten upset out of all proportion with what was actually being said. And that what my wife was saying actually made a lot of sense. It's not the great big magic silver bullet that will solve all of our problems, but it is a step forward. And maybe you should talk about that. What you were talking about.
Yeah. Weed, wages, and workers is what some Democrats are running on this time. Yeah. And I hope more Democrats will run on it. Michigan Democrats have a cannabis caucus. It turns out the U.S. House also has a cannabis caucus headed by Barbara Lee. Fetterman is pro-pot. and so is Beto O'Rourke. And there is a bill that has passed the House already. Of course, it's languishing in the Senate. Of course it is. One of the things that is, and I think I've talked about this before, one of the things that's a real item of contention, and again, this is about doing the anti-racism work, as it is so often, and Barbara Lee is really on this as a California congresswoman where pot is legal, is making sure that Black growers and Black business people get licenses and have access to capital.
Yes.
And that this doesn't just turn into a business opportunity for Wall Street and a business opportunity for R.J. Reynolds, which already has all of the names of ganja and, all of these marijuana terms copyrighted because they're ready. But really dealing with the equity issue. And that is something that the Democratic Cannabis Caucus in the House cares about deeply.
Yes. And
so it's just interesting that, and this was something we were talking about last night. And that's when I said, Chuck Schumer has a bill, and you went, I don't care because you're tired. But really, running on weed will get we hope, will get young people to the polls.
It will.
Right.
And the reason, just for sake of context, the reason I was abrasive about Chuck Schumer.
Thank you for saying that word.
Was that I was. And I fully own my abrasiveness.
You did apologize to me. And I appreciate that.
An Irishman with a dark cloud over his head.
Yes, I did.
But my wife is smarter than me, and I listen to her, and I'm the better for it. Is that Chuck Schumer had his little vote about, reproductive rights. And I just rolled my eyes because it was like, it really is like he absorbed so much of David Broder and David Brooks and Tom Friedman through his skin over the decades that he can't stop thinking like them. So the theory was, we'll hold a test vote about abortion and we'll expose the Republican Party as being opposed to abortion. And I'm like, who the fuck are you exposing it to? Who doesn't know that? We'll get them on the record. Well, okay, they clearly don't give a shit. They're proud of being anti-abortion. Who are you talking to? The 70% of people out there who are
I think he's trying long-term to talk to the voters of Maine and Alaska.
That'd be great.
Because they thought that the women they had elected to represent them in the Senate were pro-choice. And both of those women voted no. And Susan Collins, I'm not going to say the C word. I'm better than that. I'm better than that.
You mean Congress?
Congress.
Chalk? You mean chalk? That scary C word, chalk?
She would hide behind whatever. She's just not a good person.
No, she isn't. She's a horrible person. Yeah. And the people from Maine keep electing this horrible person. And she was...
she should be forced to lie down on a cot every time Mitch McConnell wants to stop a bill. Spend the night on a cot next to Joe Manchin and listen to his farts all night.
That was what was baking my biscuits. It was this a meaningless test vote that proves nothing. As if there was as if this were like, I don't know, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. There's a bunch of guys out there with press hats and notepads going, oh, well, hold the presses. The Republican Party is opposed to abortion. They hate Roe versus Wade. Stop the presses. Let's tell everyone in the country. This is breaking. And they all run into the phone booth, and the phone booths tip over like they do in, in slapstick movies. That world is the world that I think Chuck Schumer lives in, but it isn't the real world. Yeah. And so I appreciate the fact that we do have some long-term thinking strategic people like Katie Porter, like Liz Warren, working on our side.
And but John Fetterman is going to work on our side too. I mean, I realize there's some, again, anti-racism issues with him we got to work on. But he visited every county in Pennsylvania, and he won every county in Pennsylvania.
He ran for office like you're supposed to run for office. Run and go place to place and talk to people and shake their hands and look them in the eye. Yeah. And I want my generation to get out of the way. I want people who are older than me by 20 years in Congress. I want them to retire. I want them to pass along their gifts for strategy and their understanding of legacy of the House that they've been in for all this time, and the corporate history, the institutional knowledge. I want to pass all that along, and then I want them to go away and retire and
Enjoy
let
their
people
great-grandchildren.
Right. Go and enjoy your life. You've earned
Hey,
it.
Drift Class, I want to
Yes.
retire someday too. But not today, Drift Class, not today.
Today,
So we're going to do a news roundup.
Okay. I suppose we can do that. A little break from the usual. We'll do a little news roundup.
The Bidening continues, and so far, not a single day of golf at a Biden-owned resort.
Oh no! I knew I was
He
disappointed.
Calls himself a president.
You call yourself a president? How many?
Where's your golf resort?
How many? Tell me exactly how many millions of dollars the Secret Service has spent on rent
at
your properties. My tax money at your properties. Yeah. Now, this is not a record, and I don't think it'll change any minds, but it's worthy of noting. On the same day, Republicans both held a press conference blaming Biden for the baby formula shortage, and 192 of them voted against a bill that would ensure access to baby formula during the shortage.
The Justice Department requests transcripts from the January 6th committee. The DOJ indicated that some committee interviews may contain information relevant to a criminal investigation we are conducting. Oh.
Poop. A lot of pooping going on in among House Republicans. And this is what both siderism has wrought. Mm-hmm. The cowards on the Buffalo News editorial board immediately went on to both sides the racist mass murder. The editorial board, quote, politicians on the left and right must speak out against the lie of replacement theory. In the editorial, they could not name a single person on the left that has ever supported the great replacement bullshit, but the news and editorial board have themselves endorsed plenty of openly racist right-wingers like our old friend Carl Palladino.
Oh, my God.
Yep.
So that's why they had to say the left and the right.
Whenever you hear it, it's both sides, it's left and right. They're definitely talking about Republicans. They're definitely talking about conservatives. They're definitely talking about the right.
They're definitely trying to whitewash their own history. And they're definitely lying to.
Yes. You are being lied to. So take that for what it's worth.
In the category of Republicans hate when you remember stuff, from Vanity Fair, Republicans are furious that people remember they've been pushing the racist great replacement rhetoric for years.
Oh, no.
Elise Stefanik has led the charge, blasting the media for accurately reporting her racist rhetoric from last Saturday.
My enemies will use my words against me.
Yeah.
Yes. As you've already mentioned, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has effectively gutted the SEC's authority to regulate the financial industry.
GOP primaries show that MAGA lunatics are now clearly in control of the Republican Party, and Trumpers more or less leading the MAGA freaks. Now, the question is he going to share any of his money with those candidates? I kind of doubt it.
There's a lot of clips I can pull about you never give the money back. You never give the money back. Yeah. God, the first thing you'll learn at grifter school is you never give the money back. Yeah. Speaking of which, 26 billionaires, including Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, pay just a fraction of the taxes that you, the average American taxpayer, owes. A new analysis finds that Elon Musk had an average tax rate of just 2.1% on his wealth grown from 2013 to 2018.
And this is why he's voting Republican from now on.
Yeah.
He doesn't want taxes. That's it.
No.
The Las Vegas Sun issued a desperate plea to non-MAGA Republican candidates. Really? Which ones? Which one? We can't find Republican candidates who are not a threat to democracy. So this is what the Philadelphia Inquirer had the same problem. That just decided not to endorse any Republicans because they couldn't find any Republicans who could pass what they called a roadside sobriety test. Mm-hmm. Who is the president? I've been in an ambulance before.
Uh-huh.
You know, when I broke my ankle, they took me by ambulance to the hospital. And they asked me that question, who's the president? And I said, oh, God, do you get people who don't know that Obama's president? This was back when Obama was president. Do you get people who don't know that Obama's president? And they said, oh, yeah, we get people who think Reagan's still president because they're intoxicated or on drugs or have dementia or whatever, mentally. But these candidates, these Republican candidates, the Philadelphia Inquirer's editorial board sent them a questionnaire hoping to endorse Republican candidates for the primary, not for the general election, just to say, here's the good guys on their side, here's the good guys on the Democratic side. You should vote. Vote however you vote. And they couldn't find any that would answer the president of the United States as Joe Biden.
Because they'd have their balls cut off by Donald Trump.
Right. So roadside sobriety is not there in the Republican Party. Okay.
And I'm going to take the next two, and then I want you to do the last one all by yourself.
Okay.
The first one is Fiona Hill says Vladimir Putin got frustrated many times with Donald Trump because the Russian leader, quote, had to keep explaining things to him over and over again because Donald Trump is very stupid. Next story is more Trump country news, which is tragic but, predictable. Pro-Trump counties continue to suffer far higher COVID death tolls than non-pro-Trump counties.
And this was just a lovely story I came across on Reddit from Reuters. A nun in the Congo has overcome electrical blackouts with a homemade hydroelectric power plant. Sister Alphonsine Ciza spends most of her day in gumboots, white veil tucked under her builder's hat, manning the hydroelectric plant she built to overcome daily electricity cuts in her town of Miti in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. She works around the clock with a team of nuns and engineers, greasing machinery and checking the dials of a generator that is fed from a nearby reservoir and lights up a convent church, 2 schools, and a clinic free of charge. Without the plant, residents would only have electricity 2 or 3 days a week for a few hours. We sisters cannot function this way because we have to provide a lot of services, said Ciza, who is 55 years old. She had a portable voltage meter slung around her neck in the town of about 300,000 inhabitants near the border with Rwanda. Fed up with relying on candlelight and costly fuel-powered generators, Ciza started raising money in 2015 to build the hydropower plant. She picked up skills as a young nun, repairing electrical faults around the convent, which convinced superiors to send her to study mechanical engineering. Isn't that workforce development, Driftglass?
It sure is. And I just love this story. It
took Ciza's convent 3 years to raise $297,000 and build the plant, which generates between 1/2 and 10% megawatt. What is it? 0.05 and 0.1 megawatts.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to Ciza's efforts, students at the secondary school can now learn computer skills from screens rather than from books. Previously, power often only came on at night when children were no longer in school, says the school's headmistress. It is just a wonderful story. She built a power plant herself.
She saw the need, got herself the skills, got herself the support, and focused her attention on this one thing. This thing is going to change the life of the town and the clinic and the students and and her convent.
Yeah.
And she went out and did it. And she is now, as I understand it, training a cohort of nuns and engineers
to be able to maintain the plant after she's gone. Right.
Yeah. Which is just amazing. I just love stories like that. When I feel down and then one of these, comes over the transom, I go, that's right. That's my species. That's right. That's the sort of people that we want to be. That's the sort of model we want to follow. And there are plenty of people like that out there. In local news, Republican primary candidates for almost every office here are trying to out-Trump each other and tag the other candidates as Pritzker's favorite candidate. Meanwhile, the Democratic Governors Association is running ads to get Republicans to vote for weak candidates in their primaries by noting that they were endorsed by Trump and are too conservative for Illinois.
Yeah, this is the handbook that Claire McCaskill used to pick her opponent. Is running these ads and saying, we don't want this Trumpian candidate. He's too conservative for Illinois. And then conservatives see that ad and think, I got to vote for that guy because that's going to make Democrats mad.
You could just tell they're afraid of him. I'm going to vote for Darren Bailey. They're terrified of that man.
Yeah.
And yeah, great. You should. We're terrified. You're right. You should definitely drink my tears and go vote for him immediately. and that'll make us all happy. No, not me, though. I won't be happy.
Pritzker at a press conference this week, they asked him about his Republican opponents. And he said, I don't understand a thing that's going on over on that side. It's crazy.
We've repeated this a few weeks now. We're going to repeat it again. Follow J.B. Pritzker on Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
He is just a case study in how to message very effectively when you have a pulpit and you've got a pocket full of fuck you money.
Yeah.
And he has both of those things. And he, every day, 3 times a day, reproductive rights are safe in Illinois. We will protect you. That women should come to Illinois. We are pro-women in our state, plus other issues. And it's that kind of bang, bang. And God bless Joe Biden. He does that too.
Yes, he does. It is out of the Joe Biden handbook. And now J.B. Pritzker has ads up about the electric battery plant that's being built south of Chicago.
Yeah, Joliet, I think.
Why, in Joliet. And why it's being built in Illinois, and the clean energy commitment that J.B. Pritzker has made, and the number of electric cars that the government is going to buy in the state, and just on and on and on. And it's a pro-growth, economic security, pro-family, making sure your family has what they need, making sure your family has health care, making sure your family has a good job, living wage, etc. He's working on housing. He's working on all kinds of things. And this drumbeat, as you say, and by the way, Republicans are out of step with what's happening.
Well, can I contrast the Joliet plant and the Boeing thing? Because Boeing this week announced it's moving out of Chicago. And I was in Chicago working for the city when they moved in. And they didn't move their manufacturing plant here. They moved a few hundred jobs here from Seattle. And they basically pitted like 4 or 5 cities against each other and flew on their big private jet around and said, basically impress us. Throw tax breaks at us, throw abatement at us, throw sweet,
and weren't they all office jobs? I mean, they were all management.
They were all white-collar jobs up somewhere, in the 94th floor of the Sears Tower. Well, I call it the Sears Tower because, God damn it, it'll always be the Sears Tower.
Right?
And I even knew the guy who misspelled Boeing on the sign that they came into the city. Boeing is how he spelled it. And everybody laughed. It was like, oh, okay, we just screwed up. It's a little bit funny. It's one of those little mistakes that you make when you're typing something in and you leave and you come back on a Monday and go, oh, shit. But everybody laughed it off. He didn't lose his job over it. It was a funny thing. But they were never a jobs program. It was never a job creator. They weren't building anything here. They just had their corporate offices here. And they finally, okay, we've used up all our tax abatement. We've got all our bonuses. We've got everything we want. We've sucked the city dry. Adios. We're going to D.C. because let's face it, that's where the power brokers are. That's where we want to be. It was always a terrible idea. It's like building stadiums with taxpayer money. It's just a terrible idea to coax companies that
screws the taxpayer.
That aren't going to produce anything. They're not going to create any value by their being here other than say, hey, we have Boeing in Chicago. Now we have an actual physical plant being built in Joliet that is going to create jobs.
1,300 jobs to start with.
Create things and build things that people need. And it will advance an industry that I think we all can agree is pretty terrific. So that's the difference between getting an actual producer of jobs and wages and things that people need versus a bunch of corporate types who are fly by night anyway and always were going to be, no pun intended.
Each week we post to our Facebook page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitty is a dog, Meefy, spelled M-Y-F-I. Meefy looks so much like a dog of the Old West in this photo that I sepia-toned the photo. He lives in big sky country and seems to enjoy the mountain ranges on the horizon. And of course, Meefy eats freshly poured pet food, our fake sponsor. Whether you serve pet store perfection or dollar store dreck, your cats, dogs, etc. will sit on the kitchen floor and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured. Freshly poured, freshly poured. Oh my Lord, it's freshly poured. I'm sorry, I'm a little flat right now.
That's okay. And you know what? When I look at Meefy, what I hear is Sam Elliott.
Yeah, he's a Sam Elliott dog. He is.
Absolutely.
And you can send your Internet Kitty, dog, or other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, where you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. Hashtag, I sure hope DeJoy's days are numbered in that job.
I do too.
Good Lord.
We can all pray for that.
Don't forget our gourmet coffee guideline. Think about gourmet coffee for a moment, folks. Isn't gourmet coffee delicious?
It's so good. Even in the summer, it's good, you know?
If you can afford to buy one, a gourmet coffee, espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. Because we love it too.
We do.
This is not charity. This is our job. And we love doing this podcast. Approximately 1% of our listeners support this podcast with a contribution. Again, thank you so much for donating to my GoFundMe for the hearing aids as well. See our website, proleftpod.com, for details on how you too can be a supporter of this podcast. We have PayPal, our postal address information, Patreon, GoFundMe, merch. It's all there at proleftpod.com. Please share our show on social media. And thank you so much for doing that. If you love this podcast, please get someone else to listen to. Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Well, Blue Gal, after careful deliberation and consulting with their attorneys, the Internet Kitties have decided to boycott Tesla.
Let's think about living. Think about living. Just think about loving. Think about loving. Just think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with the switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
Professional Left Podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license, copyright 2022, BGBG Productions Incorporated.